Oh, there we are. I hit the wrong button. I was supposed to add us back to the stage, and I hit the wrong button. But guys, welcome back to Conversations at Ken's Cafe. We've got a wonderful returning guest on the channel, and he's going to be on next Monday with Leighton Morrison as well. But Tim Hammond, you've had a fantastically, uh, let's say, experience in your life where something happened in your life that changed everything, took you down an entirely new path. But give us just a brief understanding of, what or where you started, as in your government side of things, into where you are now. Are you not hearing me, Tim? Okay, I don't know. You're not hearing me at all?
I can see you talking on the screen, but I can't hear anything.
Okay, guys, just hold on a second. I'm going to jump off and I'm going to jump back on. We'll see if that resets things. So, Tim, we can hear you, so you carry on. Yeah. Let's see if I can. Good morning, good afternoon. Lily, can you let Tim know to start talking? He can't hear me. I'm going to try to reset myself and see if that works. Okay. Okay, guys, I know this is the craziness. Jump off. You talk. We can hear you. Okay, can you hear me now, Tim? No. Okay. So you need to jump off and come back on. So let me put that up on the screen. Okay, you jump off and come back on. We'll go to the private chat. Oh, there he went. So I don't know what's going on, guys. Every once in a while, StreamYards has this interesting phenomenon. We'll see. Okay, can you hear me now, Tim?
I can hear you now. I left and came back in, and now it's working.
Yeah. Every once in a while, StreamYard has this issue where it glitches out, because we were talking in the background before the show, no problem. So it's like, okay, what's going on now? But I was just saying, Tim, that you've had an amazing journey that you've been on. And I wanted to start with where you were, so the government section of things, to where you are now.
Sure, absolutely. Well, first, thanks for having me on, Ken. It's always a pleasure speaking with you. My background is I spent about 12 years working in intelligence analysis, disinformation investigations, and consulting across military, legal, and tech sectors. Most recently, I was a director for the College of Information and Cyberspace at National Defense University, which is the Department of War's premier educational institution for higher education. So this is where they would want to send their lieutenant colonels and above to get strategic level education about cyberspace and information operations issues. But before that, I spent years as a political disinformation investigator, where I was looking to identify and evidence inauthentic coordinated behavior online, botnets, and be able to conduct attribution analysis to see who was promoting these fake narratives and blowing them up. And they were usually aimed at either election interference or just trying to create enough digital stir that would eventually spill over into real world protests and issues. And so I supported international litigation doing that. I worked for a law firm, doing some privacy program management for establishing user data safeguards for a major social media company. And I started my career as a geopolitical analyst, specifically focused on the Mediterranean region, where I would train Marines who were going to be deployed to the Mediterranean region, and they would go through cultural education about the political systems, economic systems, social systems, geography, history, all aspects of culture before they go there so that they understand the foreign operating environment a little bit better and don't have to learn so many mistakes after the fact. But that's kind of like a wash over of what my career was and the world that I come from.
So the why I asked you to go through that is I want people to understand that, you know, when it comes to data, looking at data, understanding it, Tim is an expert in this field. So let's talk now about, you know, where you are now and why you got there. Like, let's start with your Lyme disease.
Sure. Yeah. Well, through that decade plus of working in these high tech environments, I would have these regular crashes, and I had ever since middle school, and it was fine. But eventually, these crashes got deeper and deeper, and then it would be harder and harder for me to come out of them. Eventually, discovered the cause of this was late disseminated Lyme disease. Someone used the term chronic Lyme, and I had a
Mhm.
multitude of other co-infections that were complicating it. One was Babesia, which is a single-celled parasite that lives in your red blood cells and compromises your immune system. It's actually a cousin to malaria. And so it was kind of allowing my immune system to be suppressed to where it couldn't handle the Lyme on its own. Like a lot of people that get Lyme disease and don't even know,
Mhm.
you get these co-infections and it complicates the picture. So a lot of people with chronic or severe Lyme, they're actually dealing with Bartonella and Babesia and Borrelia, which is the Lyme disease agent. But yeah, so the symptoms were always very hard to diagnose what was going on and always shifting because they, depending on which issue would kind of come to the forefront, those different pathogens express different symptoms. Um, the Bartonella has a lot of psychiatric symptoms. The Borrelia has a lot of arthritis types of symptoms. The Babesia caused extreme chronic fatigue and air hunger. So I eventually got to the point where I just couldn't keep white knuckling it through anymore. And I did become medically disabled for a time and was out of work, which was a really difficult period.
I imagine,
um,
yeah.
um, but I tried everything you can kind of imagine. I started with the traditional pharmaceutical route, and I was
Mhm.
on a whole bucket full of different antibiotics and medications. Um, and who's to say if it harmed or helped, but it pushed me to such a brink where when you start treating and attacking the Lyme bacteria, it's going to release all of these um, toxin-like substances, these particles, basically debris, that are very
Mhm.
inflammatory for the immune system. So it can cause something called a Herxheimer's reaction, which is where you treat something like Lyme and then you get actually a flare or intensification of all of the symptoms. So it seems like in treating it, you're getting worse and worse and worse, but
Yeah.
that's just kind of a nature of it. The problem was, and I would learn this later, my detoxification abilities, in my world, I'd call it my redox potential, my body's
Mm.
innate charge, like how many electrons my water in my body is capable of storing, was too low to be able to handle this like nuclear bomb option I was doing. So I wasn't able to detox and flow all of that out and heal at the rate that I was just decimating. And I was decimating my own immune system too and my
Yeah.
microbiome, which I'm probably still recovering from. So I switched to what seemed like the opposite paradigm, like naturopathic remedies. But I found that most of these approaches were adopting the same mentality of what can I throw at the body from outside at it. And
Mhm.
instead of pharmaceutical pills, this was different herbs and supplements. But really, I got to the point where I just wanted to best understand from first principles what were the environmental conditions my body needed to activate and support its innate healing capacities, because I really felt like that was what was missing. And I noticed over the course of several years that every summer when I was outside working in my garden, barefoot on the grass, under full spectrum sunlight, my symptoms would really alleviate. And then
Mhm.
every winter, when I'm back indoors under artificial light all the time, high non-native EMF environment, working behind the computer, my symptoms would really, really flare up. And it was always intuitive that we kind of all know that nature is healing, time and nature is good for you.
Yeah.
But having an intelligence analyst background, I really needed to understand why. I need to know the mechanisms of action at play here.
Yeah.
Um, maybe for it to feel real to me, even though I should have the ability to listen to my body. Um, so that led me to from biochemistry, which is the paradigm that everything I had tried was in the biochemical paradigm, looking at life at the level of molecular interactions. And that's these
Mhm.
pharmaceutical drugs, these supplements, and dealing with the pathogens as well. And it took me to a more fundamental layer of biophysics. Because in my career, I learned that the best way to solve complex problems is through first principles thinking, which is breaking everything down into its most fundamental components rather than inheriting any downstream assumptions that can kind of corrupt your thinking if you follow them. So that led me from biochemistry to biophysics. And what they means practically is how does light and the electromagnetic environment and circadian rhythms regulate and affect our biology? And it really seemed more upstream than everything else. And as soon that took me into studying circadian and quantum biology. And the more I started applying to my day-to-day life from what I was learning from those fields, the better and better I felt, and the more sustained my progress was. Because in the past, I was able to get back up on my feet, but it was
Mhm.
short-lived, and I would always really crash. And every time I was back up on my feet, I was just living in a state of fear and anxiety because I knew the inevitable crash is coming. So it made it impossible to move forward with life, which I'm sure that a lot of people, if there's anybody listening who has chronic Lyme or similar chronic illness, they'll understand what I mean by that. But it was when I fixed my circadian rhythms, my light environment, my light hygiene, that I started developing enough charge and capacity to move forward and heal.
Well, and that's one of the things, you moved into that direction and you're recharging your entire body, all your cells, all the biology that's inside the cells. And you mentioned quantum biology. And guys, if you don't understand much about quantum biology, we're going to the energetic side of biology and what actually powers the biology in our bodies, in our plants, on our very planet. And that's where you mentioned, like going out barefoot in the summer, connecting with the planet, connecting with the people refer to as the human resonance.
Yeah.
Now, everybody, if you guys look in the window behind Tim, you're going to see two different lights. And these are lights that Tim has to help him, you know, energize himself and his biology, his cells, to not have that stress of going into those down cycles. But Tim, let's talk a little bit more on the circadian rhythm, because you found that cycle of morning and evening light was actually very important as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I'd say that that's kind of step one. So your
Mhm.
circadian rhythms are biological rhythms that are operating on roughly 24-hour timescales that regulate everything from your sleep-wake cycles to your cellular regeneration, hormone regulation, neurotransmitter production. The vast majority of the processes in your body have some sort of circadian regulation. And that's because we evolved on a spinning planet that's orbiting a star. So we have
Mhm.
regular cycles of light and darkness. And that availability, light is electromagnetic energy, right? So that increase in electromagnetic energy and then the decrease in electromagnetic energy, that creates other types of environmental changes, like those in temperature, those in moisture levels. And so early life needs to maintain internal homeostasis or relatively stable internal conditions amid constantly external fluctuations in an external environment. So the way to do this is life evolved circadian clock genes in our cells. And this is bacteria, plants, animals. We all have these. And the reason is because it's a means of predictive adaptation. So if you were to watch a sunflower plant, you'd see that its leaves droop at nighttime, and then it starts perking back up and turning and orienting to the east, actually before the sun has risen above the horizon, just before. So that's called heliotropism, or tracking of the sun. And it cued scientists off to where if it's predicting this, there must be some biological clock mechanism that's a means of predictive adaptation. And that's exactly what they found. And the molecular mechanisms behind circadian clocks won a Nobel Prize as well. I can't remember the exact year, maybe 2017. But yeah, it's fundamental to how we operate and how our biology runs, because it's the evolutionary context for the planet that we evolved under, and the sun and the specific range of electromagnetic energy that it has is the source of all life on Earth. So practically speaking, what that means is in the early morning, when the sun is low on the horizon, at that time, there's no direct ultraviolet radiation because UV gets scattered by the atmospheric gases that it has to go through. So it's only available when that's later on the day, when the sun is more direct and doesn't have to travel through so many atmospheric gases. But what that means is there's an early signal in the early morning that's this kind of balanced peak between the red and blue hues. And that's a signal to the eyes and direct to the brain to kickstart a master clock in the brain. So in your brain, you have something called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or SCN, and it serves as a master clock. And it reads the light environment, the specific wavelengths of light in the environment, to know what time of day it is, because those wavelengths are always dynamically shifting as the sun travels across the sky. And its role is to distribute all that light timing information to all the peripheral clocks throughout your body, and your muscles, and your liver, and your pancreas. And they need to know that timing information in order to know whether to upregulate or downregulate their activities. So for example, this blue light is a daytime signal that is very stimulatory. So it's going to activate the pituitary gland. It's going to raise our cortisol and our blood sugar to get us up and going for the day. So you want that early low angular morning light exposure to burst your cortisol high, and then it'll slowly decrease throughout the day. Meanwhile, you have melatonin that's going to have an inverse wave in relationship to that. So at night, when that blue light diminishes, that's a signal for the pineal gland to be the primary activation, have that pituitary gland off, cortisol down, and ramp up the melatonin, because that's essential for cellular repair, autophagy, apoptosis, healing while you sleep. It's not just melatonin is not just a sleep hormone. It's the hormone of regeneration while you're sleeping. So, and artificial blue light at night would be a daytime signal that impairs that melatonin release. So even if you feel like you're sleeping fine, you're not going to get that regenerative capacity you could. So there's kind of two ends to that circadian perspective, that getting ample, regular, low angle morning sunlight exposure outdoors through the windows doesn't work because they filter the wavelengths. And then blocking the artificial blue daytime signal at night that all of our LEDs, our screens, our phones, our TVs all emit a sharp peak in this blue daytime signal. So that's kind of around the world of the circadian, but happy to answer any more specific questions about it from you.
Well, I know I tell people all the time, and like Lily put up here, the healing takes place as you sleep. And it's exactly to the point. You know, we often, the old saying of your kids, you know, they sprouted overnight. It's because that's when the cells are actually building and growing and, like you said, repairing for our health. And that's how much importance people need to put on the proper sleep cycles in your body. Now, I did want to mention, like I studied bees a long time ago, 6 or 8 years ago. inside the hive where it's totally dark and you would never know, they never see the light inside. When a bee comes back from a flower patch, it comes in and it does a dance inside to let the other bees know exactly where the flowers are. And it also gives directions based on the sun, where the sun is in the sky, where it can't see where the sun is. And it can give timing where it'll actually adjust its dance to say, okay, now it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon. The sun's over here now. So you need to travel this direction for this long. In tracking the sun, they, in knowledge inside of the beehive, inside of the bee, can tell them exactly where the sun is and as it moves across the sky. And our cells inside of us,
Yeah.
as Tim said, we do the exact same thing. We just don't ever think about that. And that's the problem, because our thinking has been warped into only seeing, A, B, and C, when there's, so much more there. And Tim, your research and your analytical skills have really taken your understanding to a level where most people would never guess that this is actually happening. And I appreciate you
Right.
so much for taking the thousands of hours that you have to bring this information. Now, let's go into the light, because you have an
Sure.
orange light and a red light there.
Yeah.
So what's the difference?
So I'm using, obviously, first I'll explain what the problem of our modern artificial lights is.
Please.
So in the early 2000s, incandescent light bulbs were phased out of the market because they were seen as energy inefficient because they give off heat. Well, that heat is actually infrared light. We don't have visual photoreceptors in our eyes to be able to see that light, but we can
Mhm.
feel it as heat. So an incandescent light bulb is going to give off like 5 to 8% visible light, which is this kind of warm orange, soft glow. Um, Whereas the vast majority is going to be infrared. So economically, that was seen as thermal waste and economically
Yeah.
inefficient. We're spending money for heat, and that's not helping us see. So LED technology, what it enabled us to do was to isolate the visible spectrum, increase the sharp spike in blue because that really helps us see bright and clear the most, and then completely remove all of the infrared. So that seems like economic efficiency. That seems like it makes sense. But in doing that, we inadvertently created a biological energy deficiency. The
Mhm.
reason for that is just because we can't see it, infrared light is an essential nutrient for the mitochondria in our cells. So, in all of our cells, except for red blood cells, you have hundreds to thousands of mitochondria, which most of us know are the powerhouses of our cells. They create our energy for us.
Mhm.
And critically, they have something called an electron transport chain in them, where they will break down electrons from our food that's stored in our food and use these electrons to funnel them through this relay system called the electron transport chain that's made up of 4 protein complexes. And that generates this charge gradient that helps them power and produce ATP, the cellular energy currency. And it also helps them create water, which is really important biologically. Well, all of these kind of cellular machine components that I'm describing, they're all surrounded by water. And infrared light is long wavelength electromagnetic energy. So if I talk about the electromagnetic spectrum that we evolved under, it goes from infrared, which is really long wavelength, low energy, low frequency. And then as you increase and get shorter wavelengths, we get into the visible spectrum of the rainbow, Roy G. Biv. And then we get into the ultraviolet, which is the shortest wavelength, highest frequency, highest energy. So that's this native context.
Mhm.
Infrared, because of its long wavelengths, it has the ability, unlike the other wavelengths of light, or you could think of wavelengths as colors as well.
Yeah.
It penetrates into this body and through the body. And it is absorbed by the water that surrounds all of these cellular machinery components in that mitochondria. And it modifies the viscosity of that water, and it helps. There's something called an ATPase nanomotor, at the
Okay.
end of this electron transport chain, and it spins. Think of like a turbine. And its spinning process is pumping protons through it to create ATP. Well, the infrared light absorption in this water, adjusting the viscosity of that water, helps this turbine spin faster and more efficiently.
Tim, hold on a second.
We can't hear anything. Wife and I can't
Oh,
hear it.
yeah.
I can't hear it.
And okay,
Nothing.
can you hear me, or
No.
they're saying on the chat that we can't hear, or they can't hear anything from either of us. So
Oh no.
I'm not sure what's going on. Yeah, I really don't. I know you glitched out for a second.
Something with StreamYard, I think.
It must be. There's 11 people watch. She says, for you guys that don't know, Silly Lily's my wife. She's upstairs watching. She says it's cutting in and out on both of us. So Tim, why don't you jump off first and you come back on, and then I'll jump out and I'll come back on.
Okay, we'll do a little dance.
Yeah, we'll see if it works.
Okay, I'll do it. I'll be right back.
Okay. Guys, I'm sorry about having this audio problems. Tim and I can hear each other fine, so it obviously it is something that's going on in the back end with StreamYard. We'll see if we can get this solved. Wife, can you hear me at all, or you're not hearing anything? Okay. You talk, Tim?
I'm back.
Okay, guys, can you guys hear Tim? You keep talking, Tim, and we're hearing you now. So, Lily, can you hear me? Can you guys hear me at all? Was it just Tim? I'm wondering if it's your Wi-Fi that's having an. Yeah, they can hear me. Well, Tim, sorry, guys. We'll carry on. We'll see what happens here.
Technical difficulties. We roll with the punches. That's what life is all about.
Well, it must be the sunlight going, hey man, we don't want you guys to hear anything, okay? So I'm not even sure where we were, but we were talking about the two different lights. We were talking about the heat and that and the LEDs. Now they have these Edison bulbs now, so it's supposedly more towards the original mechanism from when Edison first came out. Is that something? Were those lights actually better for our body than the LEDs?
Yeah, they are.
Okay.
The reason is because incandescent light is a thermal source of light that has a rich range of infrared, just like the sun. The sun is about 50% infrared light that's invisible to us, but it penetrates into our body, and our mitochondria literally absorb it to help them produce cellular energy. It fuels this mitochondrial energy, which is basically what all I was saying before in more complex words. So it's a nutrient. Our mitochondria literally absorb it, and that helps them produce our energy, right? So, and they're tuned to the solar spectrum, so they took advantage of the wavelength that's able to penetrate through the body, and also the wavelength that the sun is a majority of. And then about 43% of the sun is the visible light we can see, and about 8% is the high energy ultraviolet, which varies depending on the time of year, of course. But so we obviously, evolutionarily, we had sunlight, we had fire, which if I looked at the spectrum of fire is going to be very low in the blue and very large in the red and infrared. And then we had the incandescent light bulb. An incandescent light bulb, if I took an image of its spectral graph, it's going to look just like fire. Very low in the blue, really, really rich in the red and infrared. Then just LED light bulbs only started dominating the market and phasing incandescence out in the early 2000s. I believe the compact fluorescent light bulb came out in 1938. So that was the first real artificial light source that eliminated the infrared, and it has a sharp spike throughout the visible spectrum that looks nothing like fire, nothing like incandescent light bulb, nothing like the sun. And then LEDs, in some ways, almost, well, not worse, but just as bad, and in some worse in some ways because it became so dominant. So LEDs are not the best because they isolate the blue, and that blue light in nature, it's a stimulatory effect. It's increasing in the morning to raise your cortisol, raise your blood sugar, get you up and going for the day. It's a daytime signal to the brain. If you isolate that and remove the red and infrared, it runs rampant without any of the red and infrared's balancing effects. So in nature, you're never going to get blue light without it being balanced by abundant red and infrared. Because while blue light is stimulating, red and infrared are very restorative. And infrared light, this is the basis of photobiomodulation or red light therapy, that it helps with DNA repair and tissue repair and recovery. And really, people are so attracted to red light therapy these days simply because we're not outdoors enough, and we've removed the sources of infrared from our indoor light environments with the LED lighting revolution. So besides the sharp spike in blue that's not balanced with the red and infrared, the fact that this lighting has taken away all of the infrared, now you've taken away that mitochondrial support. And kind of going back before our little glitch, I was explaining that infrared light gets absorbed by the water that surrounds the mitochondria's molecular engine components, and
Yeah.
it kind of acts like an engine lubricant that keeps the system running, that keeps your ATP production high, and helps offset reactive oxygen species, which is like it's off-gassing its byproducts. But if you remove all the infrared and you still have the same energetic demands, you're basically running an engine hot, hot, hot without any engine lubricant. And you can imagine what happens there. And so focusing on your mitochondrial health, and since mitochondria require infrared light inputs to function properly, that's a really root cause level way of looking at your health, because if any given cell, about 70% of your mitochondria get dysfunctional, now that cell is in a diseased or dysfunctional state. So you have a lot of resilience up to that point, but there's a tip over point. Now, if that keeps escalating and then about 70% of the cells in any tissue are dysfunctional with mitochondrial dysfunction, now you have diseased state manifesting in that tissue. So a lot of our modern chronic illnesses that have diagnostic labels that describe clusters of symptoms with no known root cause, a lot of these can be boiled down simply to mitochondrial dysfunction. So we should really wake up when more than half of the American population is diagnosed with at least one chronic illness, which constitutes the majority of our healthcare costs, is inhibiting quality of life and productivity of our country. Even from my perspective, from my previous career, it's a national security issue. We should really be paying attention to circadian rhythms and our light environments, our electromagnetic environments, because that is having an effect on our mitochondrial function, and mitochondrial function is at the root of our health.
Okay, so we know what the problem is now. Okay, is we've switched over to LED, and I'll be honest, I have LEDs throughout my house. Before we go into that, let's go to the plants though. Okay,
Yeah.
how is it affecting our plants? Because I do growing indoors. I'm in Canada, so I get winter. I can't grow outdoors in the winter. So of course I'm using the LED lights for growing my plants. How is if I'm going straight at LED without the red and blues in the spectrum, if I'm going mainly the white, how is that affecting my plant growth, and is that something I need to be concerned about?
I think it's a really interesting question. It doesn't affect them in the same way because for photosynthesis, plants predominantly absorb in the red and blue wavelength range. They reflect green, which is why we see green, and they also reflect infrared. So this is why if you
Okay.
get a little bit too much sun and a little bit too much UV exposure in a day, go sit under the shade of a green tree for a little while because it's reflecting infrared light that helps repair some of the DNA damage that the UV can cause. So that's always very restorative. It's another
Yep.
mechanism of action why forest bathing or taking a walk in the forest, Shinrin Yoku, why these are actually healthy for you. And there's also a effect of green light through the eyes that increases your endogenous enkephalins, which is an endogenous opioid that helps with pain relief. So there's a lot of interesting kind of side tales there. But so the infrared deprivation inside your home is not going to necessarily negatively impact the plants as much as it's going to negatively impact you.
Okay.
Um, However, the circadian biology, they also are circadian organisms. So the timing of that light, and they have circadian clock mechanisms as well, would be something that you could experiment with and just consider.
Hmm. So, because as a grower, we're in that environment on a regular basis. You know, is that going to, like, I know we wear glasses because of the brightness, etc. Is it something that we really need to be concerned with? Because there's people that they're in that environment for 8 hours out of their day, working there. Is it something we need to be aware of that could be damaging us, that we need to look at something else as well?
Yeah, another good question because it's very practical. And I've worked with a few clients who had this exact profile. They are growers. So they
Mhm.
were inundated and under artificial lighting conditions all day long. So the best thing to do is to kind of charge yourself up first. If you can prioritize, get outdoors when the sun is crossing the horizon at sunrise because the balance peak in the red and blue wavelengths at that time is going to set that circadian clock mechanism in your brain so that all the
Mhm.
systems know what time it is and can operate cohesively together. So that's foundational. So even if you can step outside for a few minutes, that's good. And then if you're operating within that artificial light and dark environment all day long, that's okay, but if you can, just take some regular sun breaks. So if I'm
Mhm.
out working indoors for 90 minutes, if I can spare 3 to 5 minutes every 90 minutes to just go outside and look around and get some of that natural full spectrum light exposure in my eyes, that'll help your body keep determining, okay, we know what time of day it really is, and also give you that infrared light exposure for basically charging the mitochondria, to speak in simple terms. Another thing to do is you could wear yellow blue blocker glasses. So
Yeah.
these yellow tinted lenses, which you can't see super well here, but they're yellow, not clear. The clear ones don't work. Don't buy them. They're pretty much a scam. But
Okay.
yeah, it's not worth your money. But the yellow blue blocker glasses will block about 50% of the blue light. So they will
Mhm.
protect your eyes from some of this oxidative stress that the isolated blue light can cause, which also contributes to things like macular degeneration, besides for the circadian dysregulation. So, but it allows enough of the blue to come in that you still have that daytime signal because you wouldn't want to wear dark orange or red lenses in the middle of the day. You'll basically get too sleepy. So, proper time and timing and usage of blue blocker glasses is important. And there is also a free guide. I guess I'll plug it now. There's a free guide on my website, regenerint.com. That is for blue blocker glasses, just to know what works, what doesn't, how to use them. Yeah, there it is. So you, for the listeners, you can go download those for free, just to start exploring the idea. It's mostly important for people who are working in high artificial light environments. If you're under fluorescent lighting or LED lighting all day long, some daytime blue blockers are something you could consider. Or after the sun has gone down, sunset, that's when you really want to protect from the blue light because that's that daytime signal that's going to ramp up cortisol and suppress melatonin. And you need that melatonin to heal while you sleep.
Mhm.
Look into investing in a good pair, quality pair of orange tinted or red tinted blue blocker glasses. And I've tested them. There are some companies that are higher quality than others. So just be aware of that. There's a lot of kind of players in the space now because I think red light therapy, blue blocker glasses, it's becoming more and more known and popular, but just make sure you do your due diligence. And if you're searching for these types of products, look for companies that list or publish like a spectral graph that show the wavelengths of light or the colors of light that they're blocking and what light gets through. That's always help with transparency and to see that they're effective. And like I said, the clear lenses, a lot of times you can go to your eye doctor and they'll offer you that if you pay like 50 more bucks or something like that, you can add blue light filter lenses, but they're still clear. And it's not really false advertising because they do block a specific range of blue light, but they're not blocking the specific range of blue light that's emitted by our LED devices. So there's a gap there that's rendering them effectively useless. And then people will say, "Oh, blue light blockers don't work, or they're a scam." Well, yeah, that but you're focusing on the wrong type, the wrong ones.
Well, it's
But
always been buyer beware, and
everywhere.
you know, like you have, and I'll bring it back up on stage here, the blue blocker glasses guide, guys. Take a look at Regenerint and come here. Take advantage of somebody that's done the research, and you can really, you know, not end up having the problem. But I do want to point out, you know, the circadian optimization guide that you've created, and this, and I asked him before the show if he could do the audio version of it because it's like,
Yeah.
oh my goodness, you know, you've done, you know, I don't know how many hours you had to put in to create this, but guys, if you have the chance, this is something you want to buy. If you're interested in this, you can't find somebody better, as far as I'm concerned. And believe I'm not getting a cut. I wish I was. Okay, I mean,
I paid him to say that.
oh yeah, we got something going on here, you know.
Yeah, no.
But this is, I always said, you know, find voices that resonate with you, and Tim resonates with me because I've known Tim and I've followed Tim for several years. He's somebody that I know I can trust just because he's done his research. It's his own health that he has healed with this information, and you can't find many people that can talk the talk because they've walked the walk. But you know, Tim, what else would you like us to know about your guide before we go on to something else?
Sure. So the guide, if there's people out there like me who are just like, I am endlessly fascinated by the science of how light affects and regulates our biology. Um, so I can really nerd out about it for hours and hours. And if there's people who are like that, the first part of the guide explains the science of circadian biology with through an evolutionary lens of why we develop these circadian clock mechanisms. And then it goes into a breakdown of what light is. In the beginning of this, I talked about thinking through first principles to solve complex problems, and that's breaking things down into their most fundamental components. So we kind of take a step back in the guide and ask the question, what is light? And then so we explain the electromagnetic spectrum, and in the guide, I provide examples of biological effects that each wavelength or color of light have. Whether that's red, orange, yellow, blue, green, all of the evidence and studies we have so far, and critically, how in natural sunlight, those wavelengths of light dynamically shift across the day and have all these balancing effects with each other. And then our artificial lights, we isolate specific spectra and remove others. And then that has biological consequences because it doesn't fit the native electromagnetic context that we evolved from and to which we're adapted. And if you think about it in recent history terms, I mean, phasing out incandescence and having these LEDs just since the early 2000s, this is an incredibly recent environmental evolutionary shock to our biology. And kind of stepping away from the guide for a second, going back to something you said about just our species, we're creators, we're thinkers. We're like fish in water. It's a metacognitive problem. We never seemed to consider the effect of light on our health and our cognition until we push the bounds with our technology and our environmental changes so far to now we're having the effects, and that allows us to learn. So a lot of times when the world feels so depressing and things, but we're pushing the bounds, we have the opportunity to come back and change the technology in ways that are not biologically detrimental, but supportive. But
So
back
what
to the
you're
guide.
saying is we had to get smacked in the head hard enough to wake up and go, oh man, we loused up. Now we got to go back to the starting board.
Yeah, and we have the opportunity to integrate this
Yeah.
information, but so far on mass scale, we really need to do better because it has serious consequences. But
Yes.
so the first part of the guide goes into all of that science. The second part of the guide is if you're somebody who just wants to know, but just tell me what to do. That's what this is for. It has a checklist for you throughout the day, key times that you want to try to get outside for how long. Um, it has recommendations for the blue blockers. It has recommendations for how to build a safe, healthy tan without burning. Because melanin is actually very beneficial biologically. It's something that is kind of a miraculous molecule. But there's important nuances to UV exposure. So you want to learn about that there. So that's all the practical, actionable information. And what I like about circadian and quantum biology is like, yeah, the science can get pretty complex, but the application of that science couldn't be more simple. I'm telling you to get regular early morning light exposure outdoors. I'm telling you to block artificial blue light at night. And most of these tips, if they're not free, they're very affordable and they're completely accessible. So I like operating through this decentralized model. To me, circadian and quantum biology is this new paradigm of decentralized medicine. And from my past career, I did a lot of network analysis. So I understand implicitly that centralization brings the risk of single points of failure. And if you're talking about society at large or biological systems, or if I look at how nature's systems are designed, they're decentralized. We look at the mycelial networks underground. These are decentralized systems enabling information and energy sharing without single nodes or points of failure. And so our food systems should be the same. Our access to the sun, nobody's charging you money or exploiting you to have to
Not
go
yet,
through.
anyway.
Yeah, we all have the right to be in tune with nature because we are nature. And it's accessible and affordable and it's right out your door. And so I also find that for somebody myself who lost hope because I was so sick for so long, this was the information that also instilled me with hope because it was so empowering. Because I had already drained my wallet with all these medications and everything. It didn't cost me anything more to fix my circadian rhythms and just get in tune with. Our biology has an innate healing intelligence. It just needs the right environmental inputs to be able to enact on that. It's all about the biology. Yeah.
Well, and the thing is that this is how I named the channel. Is I did the deep dive. I took it down, like you did, Tim. And I started out, okay, well, here's soil, and to be healthy, it's all this, and then I started going down deeper and deeper and deeper. And like the wife says, I jumped into the rabbit hole, and then I found the wormhole. And when I came out the other end of the wormhole, I went, oh, well, geez, it's all about the biology. If I can make my biology happy, everything's happy, whether it's my garden or myself, because we're just made of cells. And who's
Yeah.
the cells? Oh, that damn biology. But we also know you need the building blocks, and then you need the energy. And the sun is the energy, frequency, vibration. Light
Yeah.
is all three of those. And that's one of the things that we need to understand is we need to be out in that light. The plants need to be out in that light, whether we're creating it indoors like I do for an indoor growing environment. But I wanted to talk about clouds now. Okay, it's early in the morning and it's a cloudy day. Do I want to go out there and do that morning exercise, looking at the sun, doing the sun gazing and first thing in the morning? Or do I want to only do it when, it's a clear sky and I can see?
That's probably one of the most common questions I get. So the cloud cover, it essentially doesn't matter. If you
Mhm.
can spare on a cloudy day to be out there just a little bit longer, that's going to be better. But I mean, there another aspect of the circadian regulation is something called lux, which is the measure of photons within an area, or basically the
Yep.
light, the brightness, the intensity. In your house, even in the brightest room, it's going to be like 20 to 100 times less bright than even the cloudiest day outdoors. So even stepping outside on the cloudiest day, you get that lux signal in the morning that's going to help wake up your cognition and your body to be ready for the day. And also, there's still ample infrared light. You're swimming in infrared light. You can't see it, but it's still there, even on the cloudiest day. So that matters. And also, you don't need to see the sun. So if you're in an apartment complex or you're living in a forest and there's a lot of tree cover, I really enjoy being able to directly see the sun as it's crossing the horizon. You never want to look directly at it when it's not on the horizon. You could cause retinal damage, of course.
Yeah.
But, those photons, those quanta of light, they are refracting and bouncing everywhere. So just wake up. First thing, before you look at any artificial lights, before you look at your phone screen, which is going to be this noontime signal to your biology, you want to go outside, get the natural light signal to your brain, to your suprachiasmatic nucleus, that master clock. Just go outside, look to the clearest part of the sky, look to the east, and just absorb that. And so if you're somebody who's chronically ill, I'd say like if you can be out there every day, 15 minutes a day, 20 minutes a day, that's great. Consistently, if you are rushing your kids to school, if you don't have that time, do whatever you can. I think of it
Mhm.
also like if I'm kicking a wheel down the road, if I'm going out consistently every morning, even if it's just for a couple minutes, but I'm doing it every morning, I just have to tap that wheel to keep it going, right? It hasn't stopped. So that momentum matters for these clock mechanisms. So consistency over perfection. If you are stuck indoors and you can't get out, then open up a window. If you're in a car during that sunrise time, crack open the window of the car, let some of that full spectrum light come in. Another question I get along these lines is, well, my bedroom faces east and I've got these nice windows and I always like waking up with the natural light, but still go outside because our windows are designed to specifically block infrared and they block a good amount of the red as well. So that it's causing spectral distortion that's highly blue shifted, even without the blue artificial lights being on. So still important to step outside without the intervention of windows or glass. And of course, not be wearing sunglasses.
Well, yeah, exactly. No, I have screens because mosquitoes up here. We got a lot of mosquitoes and bugs that would fly in my windows. How about that screen? And I just want to say, Cheddar Bob, reach out. We wanted to get your wife on with Leighton. So I don't know if Leighton's pushed you or not, but Cheddar Bob, reach out to me so we can get you on. So let's go back to the screen for is that going to affect and block, or is that something that doesn't really matter?
That's going to lower the lux a little bit, but obviously there's all those little holes. It's allowing full spectrum light to come in, so much
Okay.
better than a window.
So that if it's pouring rain outside, guys, you can still, open your window and look out. Now, I did want to point out something that Lily threw up in the comments, and she's been telling me this story for years. She went down to Mexico, and the girls went out. Cloudy as all get out. They figured, oh yeah, we're not going to get burnt, and they got burnt because the
Oh
infrared
yeah.
coming through the clouds. So that's something else. Is that going to really affect us when we go out? We talk about going under the trees to reflect that. If the girls had went out and stayed under the trees, would have they gotten burnt?
But they could, yeah. So this is a very good narrative because you have to develop what's called a healthy solar callus over time, or basically a tan. If you're
Right.
somebody who has very little UV exposure, and it's the UV that will burn you, not the infrared, because the UV is a high energy photon,
Yes.
very
Yeah.
short wavelength. Um, if you have no UV exposure and you're in a northern latitude throughout the winter, and then you take spring break down in Miami or Costa Rica, and then you're all of a sudden exposed to high energy UV photons, of course you're going to burn because your body didn't have any time to kind of prepare and adapt. So a tan is your body's adaptive mechanism to a hormetic stressor that is ultraviolet sunlight. And that tan is produced by melanin. And melanin is a molecule that is able to absorb with 99.9% efficacy ultraviolet light and transform it into infrared or harmless heat. That's biologically
Okay.
adaptive. So, what's interesting about melanin is that it is this biological semiconductor that is an electromagnetic transducer. It can take in all wavelengths of electromagnetic energy and transduce and convert them. And so it does that for us with the ultraviolet, which is really fascinating. And there's even
Mhm.
implications for melanin with radiation exposures and things. If you look at Chernobyl and the dark colored frogs that are there, I mean, they have increased melanin to help them with these environmental exposures. But to build a healthy tan or solar callus, what matters is getting that regular early morning sunlight exposure before there's UV. So critically, in the morning when the sun is at a low angle, there's visible light and infrared
Mhm.
light, but there's no UV yet. Once the sun is about 10 degrees above the horizon, then UVA is available. And then once the sun's 30 degrees above the horizon or more direct overhead, then UVB is available. That UVB is what is responsible for our ability when it hits our skin to produce vitamin D. So only that midday UVB exposure is going to help you increase your vitamin D levels, as a side note. But
Okay.
going outside regularly to get the early light, that red and infrared is going to stimulate filigrin, which is in the skin, and it's going to help create a breakdown of something called urocanic acid that acts as a natural UV filter, kind of like an internal sunscreen. So you need that early red light heavy stimulus consistently to increase these levels to prepare you for the UV exposure. And then you need to be slowly and safely working into that UVA window, which is going to darken and deepen the pigment of the melanin you already have. And then over
Okay.
time, work into the UVB, which is going to stimulate new melanin. So you work on that consistently. As soon as you get an erythema response or a pinkening of the skin that is not a burn, that's your cue to go into the shade, put on some clothes. And I would also recommend when you're trying to do this, avoid the use of, well, obviously sunblock, because then you're not getting the benefits of the UV. Um, and when you do need to put sunblock on, opt for mineral sunscreen, not chemical. So just something like
Yeah.
a zinc oxide. But put on clothes, go under the shade of a tree. Um, yeah, see, these are some of the, I lost my train of thought, but these are some of the tips for building melanin. And also your diet matters. So consuming a diet that's rich in DHA from things like fatty fish, consuming a diet that's rich in carotenoids from things like carrots. These will help your body produce that melanin and the things like urocanic acid to protect you. Um, and also avoiding a diet that's rich in like inflammatory seed oils, industrial seed oils like canola oil, because they have a very high oxidation rate. So when they are deposited in your skin and then hit by ultraviolet light, it will increase your propensity to burn. And now I
Hmm.
remember what I was going to say about the
Okay.
sunglasses. Sunglasses are blocking the UV signal direct to your brain. Your eyes are a direct extension of your brain. So your body can't develop these natural hormetic stressor adaptations to protect you from UV and benefit from it at the same time if you're blocking the signal. So I'm telling my brain that there's no UV in the environment if I'm blocking all of it from my eyes.
Mm.
So use them wisely. A smart time and place to use sunglasses would be if I'm boating and there's that high reflection and glare, if I'm skiing, things like that. But you do want to allow some ultraviolet light to get into the eyes, which would be, contrary to what we are told. But it is important even for things like serotonin and dopamine production in our brain to help us with our ability to focus, our overall sense of well-being. So really important. So again, there's another free guide on there, melanin rejuvenation guide, safe tanning guide, that also gives out this information and more. Because if you follow those steps, then you can go on vacation and enjoy the sun and not get like roasted because you don't want to burn.
Now,
You want the
infrared
benefits.
saunas, because
Yeah.
we're talking about the early morning and having the infrared to start the process. Would an infrared sauna be something that somebody can use to start that process?
I don't think so, because it's also the
Okay.
balance of visible red. So there's a cusp, there's some bleed over between the effects of red and infrared light. And I just don't think you're going to get the right proportions or intensity that the sun has. However, infrared saunas are a great healing modality, very therapeutic.
Mhm.
I really like infrared saunas for the fact that infrared penetrates the body and it expands something called exclusion zone water. I believe you're familiar with the work of Professor Gerald Pollack.
We have we've had him on several times. I'm trying to get him back on, but he hasn't been feeling well. So
Oh, okay. Yeah, genius of a man. So he's coined it this biological water, exclusion zone water, and it's this special kind of protective gel form of water inside and around our cells. It gets absorbed by the infrared light and it helps it expand. And it's
yeah.
actually not a liquid, it's this gel state that acts like its molecular structure is like that of a liquid crystal. So it excludes solutes. So it can, in theory, based on what we understand, expanding and supporting that with the infrared exposure can help with detoxification and flow in the body. So when you're
Yeah.
already sweating in a sauna, it's kind of another mechanism that will help that detoxification.
Yeah, and people call it structured water, easy water, but it's extremely important, to have that type of water in your body, and the wonderful thing was it was one of his students that discovered it was when they knocked over a lamp, okay, and all of a sudden they saw these reactions where there was no reaction before, and they realized it was the infrared that was having the effect. So yeah, it's amazing, to understand the stuff that we've had no clue about until the last few years, where science is
Yeah.
starting to catch up to it. But the lights you have behind you, is this something that you promote? Is there certain brands you promote? Um,
So these are both brands that I purchased from myself. I think I do have affiliate codes with them if you look on my website, if you want to save a few bucks there. So one, I believe is the lamp called from healthlighting.com. They sell these Chroma light bulbs that are just full spectrum incandescent bulbs. This one's specifically red. So this is a red light, but it
mhm.
is a red incandescent. So it's giving off red and infrared light. I have it shining on me here because there's a disproportionate spike in blue light from the computer. So it's balancing the wavelength. And there's actually been studies shown that blue light, independent of the diet that you eat, will increase your insulin and blood sugar levels. Um, red light has the opposite effect. So
Okay.
just shining red, if you're balanced the spectrum, if you're working on a computer all day long, insulin management, blood glucose, this is a kind of downstream issue or upstream issue for things like neurodegeneration, weight management, all of that. But balancing the spectrum by just adding a source of infrared, an incandescent light bulb, a red incandescent like I have here, is able to help mitigate and offset and balance that. The other one here, just for the brightness, this is something from a company called Chroma, and they sell this sky portal device. And I'm able to shift it so that if it was the middle of the day, it would be a brighter blue, but they've emitted the specific wavelength of blue light that we know to be the most detrimental, while keeping some cyan and other forms of blue that are still really important for our circadian regulation. So it really helps. When I was working in the Department of War or Defense, this is something that I had on my desk, and I had the overhead fluorescent lights off just because I couldn't concentrate, caused such headaches and
Yeah.
really bad issues with focus. And I was working in environments where I needed to maintain competitive advantage and high capacity for critical thinking. So to be able to do that, I looked like this freak who changed all my life. But I didn't care because I had a competitive and critical thinking advantage. So
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, when you find something that works, you want to keep using it. But before we head out, I live in Canada. Up here, we don't get a lot of light in the winter, and a lot of people have problems with that. The wife and I have a good friend. She had to buy a special light, um, to try to get enough light because her mood will come down if she doesn't get enough light. Do you know much about that, and can you speak to that at all?
Yeah, obviously some of these can be helpful. A lot of the traditional sad lamps that you'll see,
Hmm.
I don't see a lot of good science behind because they lack this full spectrum. They lack the infrared and red even, and are again just kind of a sharp spike in blue that are almost amplifying an indoor lighting problem that we already have. And so a lot of these people, it could be causing even more stress, even though you do want that bright light stimulus. So there are other companies. I would say look on Chroma's website. You can use Regenerint for a code. I'm an affiliate of theirs. Look for others as well that have circadian biology in mind.
Hmm.
And there are some therapeutic panels out there. EMR Tech is a company. I think Mitolux is a new one out there. There are these photobiomodulation companies or red light therapy companies that sell red light therapies panels, but a lot of them now offer red light therapy panels that also have LEDs that emit ultraviolet to
Okay.
allow some of this full spectrum light. So Chroma, for example, has a device called the Trinity that has 3 modes. You turn one on and it's just red and infrared. So if I need like tissue repair, an injury, something like that, that's good to shine on. Then it has a UVA mode that will help with the circadian regulation I would want in the morning. So that would probably be what I would recommend because that UV stimulus for the circadian regulation and that brightness, it's balanced by the restorative red and infrared rather than that's just a bright white blue LED. So those are the types of things I would have in mind when looking at a sad lamp. Is a lot of these, I would just be a little bit concerned of them potentially causing harm, even
Yeah.
while they are operating on one good thing, which is increasing that lux in the morning. But again, do your best to just expose your eyes to outdoor light. You can buy certain lights and things to support your indoor light environment, and things like red light therapy panels or these light devices are helpful tools, especially in northern climates when they're needed sometimes. But there's no alternative to the sun, even on a cloudy day, and the sun is
Yeah.
free.
Yeah.
You don't need it. You don't need a
Exactly.
discount code.
Exactly. So if somebody wants to reach out to you to talk about you, I know you do choruses, you have different services. Where's the best place to reach out? Would it be your Instagram, your X, the website, Facebook?
Probably my website, regenerint.com, regenerint.com, which stands for Regenerative Intelligence. You can shoot me an email through there. You can email me at info@regenerint.com or follow my Instagram, message me there, direct message at Regenerint. What I offer is coaching and consultations. So if you are interested in applying the science of circadian and quantum biology to your life and want just day-to-day practical insights. And a lot of it sounds really simple, like get that early morning sunlight exposure or these progressive times to be outdoors. But then what you find is the integration of this information when you deal with all the complexities of your day-to-day life and having to take your kids to school, have to go to work, and all these things. People tend to find unforeseen roadblocks. And my
Yeah.
role as a coach, and I am a certified health coach as well, and I'm also board certified in quantum biology from the American Naturopathic Medical Association. My role as that coach is to help you work around those roadblocks, apply this information to your specific context and information, and work with any of your medical providers if you're dealing with something like complex chronic illness, because these environmental aspects of things you can do to change your indoor light environment, your lifestyle habits, are free, easy, and accessible without risk, and are going to be supportive of whatever else protocols or treatments you're going to be going through. So that's one aspect, coaching consultations. I also do workshops and talks. So you can reach out to me if I've done talks at universities or just local regenerative agriculture events, which are always kind of my favorite.
Now, are you going more to the redox on when you're talking, to growers than the circadian rhythm? Because the plants have the circadian rhythm as well, but most people would understand it, I think, more as if they've heard redox potential.
Redox, yeah. And you know who talks really good about that and bridges that world a bit is Matt Powers.
Yes.
Yeah, he does a great job. I do talk about that a bit. I talk a lot more about the exclusion zone water. And we've talked about the circadian biology here, but in quantum biology, we have kind of 3 pillars of exploring light, water, and magnetism, and looking at the effects of non-native electromagnetic radiation as well. So those are kind of the 3 pillars that I focus on. And redox potential is in with the water aspect, how I tend to frame and focus on it. But yeah, feel free to reach out if you have any questions. If you're as interested or intrigued about this as I am, I love sharing the information because it gives me a lot of joy when I get to see other people benefit from something that I benefited from as well.
Yes.
Because I was in a really bad, dark place with chronic Lyme. And so it's very rewarding to have this information spread.
Well, and Tim, I want to thank you so much for coming on and sharing. And guys, he's also going to be on Leighton Morrison this coming Monday as well. So you're going to want to check that out. Leighton's going to have a lot of different questions than what I was talking about. So you guys are definitely going to want to check it out because for somebody asking me questions, 3 different people will ask me the same question and I'll answer it in 3 different ways. So I think Tim's probably going to be the same way on a lot of this, but Tim, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. It was my pleasure. I always enjoy talking with you, Ken.
Okay, guys, we're going to end the broadcast now. And don't forget, I'm on with Andy tomorrow night on Gardens, the Untold Story. So we'll see you guys then.